Picture yourself sitting down with your family on Thanksgiving before dinner, talking and watching television usually. Well, 30.5 million of us were watching the Dallas Cowboys football game. Not to mention the other 99.9 million people that tuned into the first week of February for the Super Bowl game. Some people are definitely wondering how the NFL has become so big with the large amount of viewers they receive. Well, the NFL has been around since 1920 when it was founded in Canton, Ohio. When the league was first founded, there was 8 teams, contrary to the 32 teams in the league today. Amongst the different number of teams, there were also many other differences that have evolved over time to the league that we see today. Today, I will be discussing the history of the NFL, how the league evolved, and certain key moments throughout the league's history. After listening to my speech, my audience will be informed of the particular key moments that are part of an NFL history that help shape the league today. So before the NFL was created, pro football was generally considered to be founded in 1892 in Pennsylvania, where the first official pro football game was played. Now, as we fast forward through time to 1920, there's a meeting between 8 owners held in Huntmobile Auto Showroom owned by Ralph Hay, who was the Canton Bulldogs owner of the time, the team of Canton, Ohio. And in 1920, they came to an agreement that they were going to form the NFL. Although the NFL was not called the NFL, it was called the American Professional Football Association. It was only renamed the NFL in 1922. So now, as we got to the first year of the league, while there was only 8 teams at the meeting, there was actually 14 teams in the league. The first president was named Jim Thorpe. And in fact, Jim Thorpe is such a legend within football that he has an award named after him, which is the College Football Top Defensive Back Award. But now back to the teams that were in the league. So the first year there was 14 teams. There was 5 teams from Ohio: the Akron Pros, the Canton Bulldogs, the Cleveland Tigers, the Columbus Panhandlers, and the Daytona Triangles. The 4 teams from Chicago were the Chicago Tigers, the Decatur Stanleys, the Racine Cardinals, and the Rock Island Independents. There was 2 teams from Indiana, the Hammond Pros and the Mussie Flyers. 2 teams from New York, the Buffalo All-Americans and the Rochester Jeffersons, and 1 team from Michigan, the Detroit Herald. Now, these names were not the normal names. As you can see, they were very long, choppy. However, 2 of these original 14 franchises remain. Can you guess the 2? Okay, guess not. I'll explain. In fact, the Racine Cardinals in 1988 moved to Arizona, and they were renamed the Arizona Cardinals. The next team, can anybody guess? Okay, not. The Decatur Stanleys moved to Chicago in 1921 and became known as the Bears. Now, the next major part as we fast forward through time in the evolution of the NFL was the formation of the NFL Player Association in 1956. Now, some of you are going to ask me, what is the NFL Player Association? Well, in fact, the NFL Player Association is basically the union of football. It's the union of the players against the owners. So this was very important because it turned the NFL from a sports league to a business. It turned it into something that would be around for forever because you have the workers and you have the owners. So why is this important? Well, let's think about this. You have plumbing unions, teaching unions, trucker unions. You have a bunch of different unions in the world, right? Now, all these unions are good because they represent the people that work for these companies and they protect them. This is basically what the NFL Player Association does. It protects the players. Now, what can players do within the NFL Player Association? They have rights that they can stand up for and tell the owner of the Player Association to go fight the owners of the NFL. They can protest, and they can have their contracts signed through them, and they also can fight against the owners. In fact, every couple of years, they review the contracts and the way the money is distributed in the league. And this year, they actually just signed a contract that gets the players more money. So as you can see, the NFL Player Association is still very important today. Every year, it's very involved. It's involved in the free agency. It's involved in everything: agents, the league, the teams, the number of players on the team, and all about the income of the league. So now we're going to move on to the merger of 1966, which is basically the most pivotal part in the NFL's history. So as the NFL is going through its growing periods, it had a bunch of rival leagues. The most important rival league that the NFL faced, was the AFL, the American Football League. This league was pretty substantial. It had 10 teams to it. And what happened was the NFL realized, wow, we're going to have 2 separate teams, or we can create a merger. The NFL at the time had 16 teams. So on June 8th, 1966, the two sides met and they came to an agreement. The leagues merged. The NFL took the name and then there was two conferences within it. The AFL would form the AFC and the NFL would form the NFC. However, the NFC had 16 teams and the AFC had 10 teams, so 3 teams from the NFC were moved over. These 3 teams were the Cleveland Browns, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Baltimore Colts. So now both sides had 13 teams for a total of a 26-team league. We'll discuss how the other 6 teams get to make it a 32-team league later in my speech. So now something weird that happened after this merger was created, the common schedules did not begin until 1970. But there was a championship game that took place in 1967. Now, somebody's going to ask me, how do you have a championship game if the two leagues were still separate? Because they truly didn't combine as the AFC and the NFC until 1970. So what happened was the AFL stayed the same and the NFL stayed the same. And the winners, the champions of both those leagues would play in a game called the AFL-NFL World Championship Game. And this would determine who the true ultimate world champion football team was. Because you'd have the champion on one side and the champion on the other side, and they would combine to play in the game. So after this, as I said, there's 26 teams in the league, and now we're going to move on to how the other 6 teams got there. So the last 6 teams to join were, in 1976, the Seattle Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In 1995, the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. In 1997, the Baltimore Ravens. In 1999, the Tennessee Titans joined the NFL to finalize the league at 32 teams. The last movement within the NFL was that the Houston Oilers in 2002 changed their name to the Houston Texans that we know today. Now, after that, no other movement has been made within the teams. Some teams have moved states. The Raiders moved from Oakland to Las Vegas, and that's where we're at right now. So now, over time, the rules have, of course, changed as the time period has changed. For example, one of the first things that always jumps off the page when I show my visual aid after this part is that the goalposts were on the field. They were technically on the field until 1974, and they were eventually moved off behind the end lines in 1974 due to injuries. And actually, another fun fact is that up until 1933, the NFL was using the NCAA rulebook. Now, in 1933, they adopted their own rulebook with a bunch of different rules. Over time, rules have been created. Rules have also been taken away. 2 rules that were created in the more recent time period was the catch rule. And now this is always a debate, even with instant replays that we have today. Players going to the ground and bobbling the ball is in debate of whether it was a catch or not. So everybody says that you must maintain contact with the ball and not fumble it or bobble it to the ground. Obviously, even with instant replay today, we still struggle with this. Also, the tuck rule. The tuck rule is that if a quarterback's arm's moving forward, the ball cannot be a fumble and it's an incomplete pass. One of the last parts of the evolution was that the total points averages have consistently gone up over time, showing that the offenses have changed over time. In the 1980s, the ranges were in the low 40s per game for total points, and today the average is almost in the high 80s, 48.4 points per game. Now I was going to show my visual aid here, which is just a video of football in the 1970s. And then, in conclusion, the NFL has become a long way since the start of the league in 1920. The shape of the league has changed drastically from the first year to the merger of the AFL and the NFL in 1966 to the present-day league we know today. Furthermore, the game of football has evolved within the league through the rules and scoring. In the future, it is expected for not only the league but the game of football to continue to change as everything else has in the past.